works at O'Brien Traffic. He's worked with Kittleson and Associates in the USA and Vic Roads Glenira Council and Arup in Melbourne. Mark's got a strong interest in traffic operations, road safety and design, and road user behaviour. Today he's going to talk about the issues that are facing cyclists and other road users at slip lane facilities.
Hello, as Nick said, I'm Mark O'Brien. Brevity is not my strong point, so here we go. Essentially, my background on the issue of cycling and slip lanes, which we're all here to talk to you about today, is we did a safety study on left-turn vehicle crashes versus pedestrians, which basically that was the main focus of it, but the literature review and the mitigation design options assessment basically led us into a lot of cycling issues, which I'll chat to you about today. Also, we've tried to apply some of those principles in subsequent design of on-road bicycle facilities as well as shared path crossings of intersections. Just a very quick bit of background. There are 3,500 shared lanes, so left and through lanes across the metropolitan area. About 1,400 exclusive left-turn only lanes, so we call them exclusive lanes, as well as more than 2,000 slip lanes of various flavours, more than 1,100 of which are single lane with a zebra crossing on them. So it's a big problem and we can't really ignore it, as a few of the other speakers have pointed out. The study that we did had 195 relevant pedestrian versus left-turn crashes over 5 years. What we found was that slip lanes performed better than their percentage of treatments in the network. Exclusive lanes about slightly better, and shared lanes much worse. Shared lanes had 60% of the crashes for pedestrians, but only 50% of the actual treatments in the field, whereas slip lanes were about 21% versus 30% of the treatments. So there is a difference. In terms of the type of conflict we found, these are very relevant to cyclists as well as pedestrians. There were 4 major ones, a lot of odd little ones as well, but the 2 biggies were parallel B crashes, where the pedestrian is walking across a crossing and gets hit from behind by a left-turning vehicle. So that's the dominant mode for shared lanes as well as exclusive lanes. And the perp L crash, which is a dominant at slip lanes, which is a pedestrian approaching from the left and gets hit by a vehicle on the slip lane who tends, we believe, to be looking to the right for a gap in traffic. So they're the 2 major modes. This is a graphic of the percentage. So the red in these 2 is exclusive lanes. 78% are para B, 67% for shared lanes are para B. So you can see the dominance we're talking about. And 79% in the purple for the perp L. I thought that was quite funny. For slip lanes. So there's 2 big problems that we have to worry about, which kind of helps focus our attention a little bit. I'll skip this for now. There was the main study we came across was a German study looking at left-turning trucks, which I think Dale was talking about as well, against pedestrian and bicycle crashes. 78 of 90 crashes they looked at involved cyclists, and 73% of those were para B type. So again, it's consistent across the world, but one of the key things they came up with was to do a truck field of view, again, which Dale was talking about. This black hashed area, the driver cannot see anything that's not more than 1.6 metres tall. So it's a big impact. The second key part of the study was the 2 scenarios in the para B. One is where the truck is stationary and then starts to turn and hit something, and the other is where it decelerates and then makes a turn without stopping. And the one from stationary is far more dangerous, quite possibly because a cyclist at least is aware of a vehicle decelerating next to it compared to one that suddenly turns from stationary. So they have some ability to defend themselves against a driver who either can't see them or is misbehaving. That brings us to the essential question in terms of on-road facility design, and that is basically what kind of conflict do we want? We can have a point conflict here with a shared lane where the cyclist and the vehicle meet at the intersection. Another type is where we have a weaving conflict, which happens some distance upstream for an exclusive lane and also for a left turn slip lane with a deceleration lane. Obviously, if there's no deceleration lane, that's a further complication. The conflict points are quite different. As the Neovona study pointed out, this one is quite dangerous even when vehicles are stopped, particularly, and they're very vulnerable to field of view problems. whereas this, the driver tends to be has a broader field of view when approaching the cyclist, and the cyclist also has a bit more get-out room. So for a number of reasons, I guess, I have a distinct preference, but which one is better depends on which cyclist you ask. And I think that's a key piece of information that would be useful for various researchers to look into, is which one people like and why. My preference is the slip lane with a deceleration lane, mainly because I think it's better for cyclists in terms of the types of conflicts you get. Highly context dependent though. And the other one is I prefer it for pedestrians, as long as they're improved for vision impaired pedestrians, which was a major other factor in our discussion. But it depends on traffic speeds, demand of cycling and pedestrians as well as vehicles, and the ability to provide good design. I'll quickly segue into shared paths here. General issues with crossing a shared path across a slip lane, there's a number of them, as Alistair sort of hinted at. Small island size, path alignments you can't ride, so you have to get off, lack of handrails, wrong side push buttons, traffic and bicycle speeds on the slip lane, as well as cyclists riding across crossings. Cyclists having to dismount at zebra crossings, I think that's a huge one. And pram ramps versus wombat crossings versus flush paths along the islands versus slippery TGSI tiles, which are needed for the vision impaired. So there's a lot of trade-offs involved in how you lay a path out for cyclists, and they're often in conflict with pedestrians. The other key thing to mention is there's a difference, in my view, between paths along and paths across the slip lane. Paths along are particularly difficult to implement because of the number of turns and the tighter turns that are involved, as well as cyclists having to look backwards while in motion, trying to turn on a corner to see if there's anyone coming, whereas if you're riding this way, you have a much better peripheral view of what's coming at you. The other issue is cyclist volumes are very important for suitability. This is the Footscray Road shared path, which is a classic example of you shouldn't have a slip lane here because there's too many cyclists. And you can see the cyclists here actually riding wrong way up the slip lane because they don't want to go up and over the island and wrestle with the TGSI tiles. So it's just a key factor to bear in mind. The other thing we've come up with, I guess, and happy for anyone who wants to take up promotion of it, is the green zebra crossing. And basically, this one's from the Master store at South Oakley, which is actually not legal and shouldn't be there, but it's a great example of what we're talking about. And basically, if you put a bicycle symbol under the walking legs at a standard zebra crossing, in our view, and change the road rules accordingly, you can make it a shared path zebra crossing. We think that would tell drivers to expect cyclists. It would tell cyclists that they don't have to dismount. And it's relatively simple to retrofit, and this part alone doesn't mean we need to massively change the design of the intersection. You could restrict its application to places where the sightlines are adequate, so don't put them where they're unsafe to put them, basically. The other thing is you can also use them in mid-block crossings, which on these off-road paths are becoming more and more frequent, and it avoids needs like this, apologies to our Burundara rep, for this one, which the pedestrian here may actually not legally be protected by this signage in terms of right-of-way because it's a give-way. But then it's quite an involved issue, but we're hoping there's no legal cases coming up soon about this type of crossing. So I guess to summarise my views, path across is okay for slip lanes if there's low to moderate bicycle demand. Path along is only really suitable if it's quite low, and anything moderate to high you're starting towards exclusive lanes. Slip lanes are only appropriate for shared paths if you can design them properly. Substandard ones are probably worse than not having them at all. And the other thing is my default preference would never be shared lanes, always exclusive if you can do it rather than a shared lane. And finally, just to bear in mind, exclusive lanes have design and signal operation issues all of their own, particularly in relation to para-B type crashes being struck from behind. You can use red arrows to protect pedestrian and cycle crossings, but that is a whole 3-hour session all by itself, that particular treatment. But I guess that's pretty much all I have to say, except for we agree with the wombat crossing idea. We had a slightly longer one, but yeah, I strongly support what Alistair's up to, and good luck to him. So that's the end of my presentation.